store shelves. Why would we abandon a method that lets one tree create infinite plants? And who decided nature's glitch was not for sale? What the science reveals next will change how you see every garden and every promise on a bottle. A willow branch snaps in a summer storm. It tumbles downstream, settles in the mud, and something remarkable happens. Within days, tiny white roots burst from the broken stem. No gardener, no greenhouse, no powder. Just water, a twig, and a signal coded deep inside the plant. This is the natural miracle that willow trees perform on riverbanks and in ditches across the world. The secret is not luck or magic. It is chemistry. Deep in the cells of young willow shoots, a hormone called Indolebutyric Acid, called IBA, pulses through the tissue. IBA is a messenger. When a branch is wounded or separated from the parent tree, IBA floods the cut site, instructing ordinary plant cells to transform into root cells. The message is clear. Start growing roots. Multiply. Survive. This is the same biological command the commercial rooting powders attempt to mimic, but in willow, it is built in, flowing naturally through every new shoot and flexible stem. In the wild, this chemical advantage means a single willow can send out armies of clones, each branch ready to take root wherever it lands. The process is so efficient that even a pencil-thin twig pushed into damp earth can become a new tree. Gardeners noticed this centuries ago, long before anyone named the hormone or bottled it for sale. The phenomenon is not limited to willows, but few plants do it so reliably. The power of IBA is not theoretical, it is visible, sprouting from every cut end. Here, nature's rooting signal is on full display, written in the language of cells and water, no laboratory required. A willow cutting faces more than just the challenge of growing roots. Every wound is an open invitation for bacteria, fungi, and rot. Here, the willow's chemistry deploys a second line of defense. Inside those bright green shoots, salicin and related compounds convert to salicylic acid, the molecule plants use to rally their immune systems. When a stem is cut, salicylic acid signals the cells to brace for attack, activating genes that build barriers against infection and stress. This is the same core ingredient that inspired the invention of aspirin, but in plants its role is even more urgent. The defense message travels quickly, moving through the tissue like a wave. It instructs cells to produce protective proteins, strengthen their walls, and limit the spread of pathogens. For a cutting, this means a better chance of surviving the critical first days when rot is most likely to strike. Laboratory studies confirm that salicylic acid can reduce the risk of damping off and other fungal diseases in vulnerable plant tissue. The effect is strongest in the youngest, most flexible willow twigs, those richest in the active compounds that both stimulate rooting and guard against decay. This dual action, IBA to command root growth, salicylic acid to shield against rot, explains why willow water is more than just a rooting tea. It is a survival formula, concentrated in the newest shoots. The chemistry is not just about making roots, it is about keeping the cutting alive long enough to grow them. In the 1960s, a quietly circulated bulletin from the American Rose Society described an experiment that would become legendary among plant propagators. The test was simple. Rose cuttings trimmed and prepared were divided into groups. Some soaked in plain water, others were steeped in willow water, made by infusing young green willow twigs in boiling water for a day. The results stunned the gardeners. The willow-treated cuttings rooted faster, sent out more roots, and survived at higher rates than any previous method they had tried, including commercial rooting powders available at the time. The bulletin claimed willow water showed a rooting effect unmatched by any previously known substance, including plant hormones. Word spread through gardening clubs and extension offices. For softwood cuttings, those tender, flexible stems taken in spring and early summer, the advantage was especially clear. Even species considered tricky to root, like old garden roses and some shrubs, responded. Experienced growers began to notice a pattern. Willow water did not just help easy plants, it tipped the odds on the hard ones too. In the best cases, rooting rates jumped from 50 or 60% to over 90%. The experiment did not just prove a point, it gave gardeners a reason to trust an old method over a new product. For every skeptic, there were stacks of rooted roses to show what willow water could do when the conditions were right. Skeptics have long questioned whether willow water truly lives up to its legend, especially when compared to store-bought rooting powders. Not every cutting responds the same way. In controlled trials, easy rooting species like apple often show little difference. One test found 96% of apple cuttings rooted in willow water, while 92% rooted just as well in plain water. For plants that root without much coaxing, willow's effect can be subtle, even negligible. The story shifts with more difficult species. In commercial nursery experiments with petunia cuttings, low concentrations of willow water improved survival rates above untreated controls, but still lagged behind synthetic Indolebutyric acid. At high concentrations, willow extract actually became toxic, wiping out every cutting in the group. In olive trials, only bark-derived willow water made a difference, and then only when paired with commercial hormone. The results are clear. Willow water is not a universal fix. Its edge appears strongest with softwood or semi-hardwood cuttings, young flexible stems already inclined to root. Hardwood cuttings, or those from tough species, rarely benefit. Standardization is another hurdle. The strength of willow water depends on the species, age, and season of the twigs, as well as steep time and temperature. No two batches are exactly alike. Commercial powders deliver a measured dose every time. Willow water is always a bit of a gamble. That is why the best way to know is to test it yourself. Set up a simple experiment. Take matched cuttings from the same plant, treat half with fresh willow water, and treat the rest with commercial powder or plain water. Track the rooting percentage, root growth, and signs of rot. Let the numbers decide. Nature's formula may surprise you, but only if you put it to the test. In 1935, inside the Boyce-Thompson Institute in Yonkers, New York, two researchers, Percy Zimmerman and Alfred Hitchcock, set out to crack the code of plant growth. Their experiments were not just about tradition or folklore. They tested pure compounds, one after another, searching for the molecule that could turn a stubborn cutting into a rooted plant. The breakthrough came with Indolebutyric Acid, IBA. Unlike the natural auxins found in willow water, IBA proved stable and consistently powerful, triggering root growth across a wide range of species. Their findings landed them the Newcomb Cleveland Prize from the American Association for the Advancement of Science that same year, a rare honor for plant science. The 1935 paper did not just land on library shelves. It set off a wave in horticulture, moving propagation from kitchen experiments to a discipline grounded in chemistry. The discovery of IBA's potency was not just a scientific milestone. It was a moment when the rules of plant cloning changed, and suddenly, nature's secret recipe had a new, synthetic rival. Within 3 years of the Boyce-Thompson Institute's breakthrough, the science of rooting moved from the laboratory to the marketplace. Patent filings began in 1937, with Merck & Co. securing rights to synthesize Indole-3-butyric acid at industrial scale. The chemical process, detailed in United States Patent Number 2,248,155, promised high yields and low costs, a formula ready for mass production. By 1941, Merck launched Hormone, a powder that delivered a measured dose of IBA to every gardener's hand. The product's claim was simple, shelf-stable, scientifically proven, and ready to root cuttings on demand. Hormone arrived in small tins and plastic vials, priced for the home gardener but scaled for national distribution. Ads in trade magazines and garden catalogs promised miracle results. No more soaking willow twigs, no more waiting for the right season. For the first time, a plant's natural rooting signal was packaged, branded, and sold as intellectual property. The knowledge that once flowed from a tree now moved through a patent office and into retail stores, transforming a free biological process into a product line. A small tin of Hormone powder sat on hardware store shelves in the 1940s for less than $1. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $10 to $20 today, roughly the price of a modern rooting powder jar at any big box garden center. The pitch was irresistible, a product that promised consistent results, no guesswork, and a shelf life measured in years, not days. Gardeners who once foraged willow twigs from riverbanks now reached for a branded powder, confident that every scoop delivered the same dose of IBA. Season after season, retailers embraced the model. A single willow tree could supply a neighborhood for free, but a jar of powder sold again and again, year after year. The economics favored repeat sales, not abundance. Ads in gardening magazines showcased Hormone and Rootone as scientific progress, packaged, predictable, and always available. The price gap grew, not just in dollars, but in the loss of self-reliance. The switch to chemicals wasn't about performance, it was about turning a local, renewable resource into a national retail product. Young willow twigs hold the highest concentration of the plant's rooting signal. These are the shoots that bend without snapping, often bright green or golden yellow, and no thicker than a pencil. Older branches have more bark and less of the active compounds that drive root formation. So focus on the fresh growth from spring or early summer. Snip a handful of these flexible twigs, strip off any leaves, and cut them into pieces about 1 inch long. The more surface area exposed, the more efficiently the hormones and salicylic compounds will leach into the water. There are 2 ways to extract the chemistry locked inside. The fast method calls for boiling water. Place the chopped twigs in a clean jar or bucket, enough to fill it about 1/3 of the way. Pour boiling water over the pieces just enough to cover them completely. Seal the container and let it steep for 24 to 48 hours. The heat pulls out the auxins and salicylic derivatives quickly, creating a pale, weak tea. Once the water cools to room temperature, strain out the solids. The resulting liquid is ready for use. The slow method is even simpler. Cover the twig pieces with cold water instead. Let the mixture sit at room temperature for 2 or 3 days, allowing the compounds to diffuse gently. This process takes longer, but can be just as effective. Once the water takes on a faint amber tint, strain and reserve the liquid. Both methods yield a fresh infusion of the same active ingredients that willow uses to root itself by the riverbank. The next step is application. Use this living solution to multiply plants without a trip to the garden center. Fresh willow water in hand. The next step is deceptively simple. To give your cuttings the best start, begin with a pre-soak. Submerge the trimmed ends of your softwood or semi-hardwood cuttings in the willow solution, just the bottom 1 inch or 2. Let them sit for several hours, or even overnight if you're working with plants known to root slowly. This soaking period allows the natural auxins and salicylic compounds to penetrate the tissue, priming the cells at the cut site to shift gears from healing to rooting. After the soak, transfer your cuttings to their chosen rooting medium. Perlite, sand, or a light potting mix all work. Water them in with the leftover willow solution, ensuring the soil is thoroughly damp. For the first week, use willow water in place of regular irrigation. Each watering delivers a fresh dose of the root signal and immune support, keeping the odds in your favor during those vulnerable days before roots appear. Some gardeners root cuttings directly in jars of willow water, but this method can limit oxygen and sometimes leads to rot, especially if the water isn't changed frequently. For most species, the soak and plant method strikes the right balance. Enough hormone to get roots started, enough airflow to keep them healthy. If you have extra willow water, store it in the refrigerator and use it within 2 weeks. After that, the active compounds begin to break down, and the rooting boost fades away. With this method, you're not just copying what willow does in the wild, you're harnessing the same chemistry right at your potting bench. Willow water is a living solution, not a bottled product. Its power comes from fresh plant chemistry, but that freshness comes with a catch. Once strained and stored, willow water begins to change. Microbes, bacteria, and yeasts that hitchhike on every twig find plenty to eat in the sugars and plant compounds left behind. Within a week at room temperature, the water can turn cloudy or develop a sour smell. By day 14, most batches have lost their edge. Auxins and salicylic acid start to break down, while microbial growth accelerates. The rooting boost fades, and what is left is little better than plain tap water. Refrigeration slows this process, stretching the useful life to about a month. But nothing stops it entirely. The active hormones are not shelf-stable. They weaken with each passing day. That is why willow water never became a retail staple. Unlike the white powder in a garden center, you cannot keep a jar of it on a shelf for years. Nature's formula is potent, but it is fleeting. If you make more than you need, there is one trick to preserve its strength. Freeze it. Pour the extra willow water into ice cube trays, seal them, and tuck them into the freezer. The cold halts both microbial growth and chemical breakdown, locking in the active compounds until you need them. Thawed, the solution is nearly as effective as the day it was made. For gardeners chasing abundance, this is the closest you will get to bottling the wild energy of a willow branch, fresh, ready, and always on hand, as long as you respect its limits. Today, plant propagation is still shaped by what can be packaged, not by what works best. As patents expire and knowledge spreads, more gardeners reclaim nature's unbottled code. The willow's secret was never lost. It was just made inconvenient. In a world driven by shelf life, true abundance still grows wild, waiting for those willing to make it fresh. What will you choose to cultivate?